Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and hello. This is I Faqir Sabahat Ashraf, back here again with another interesting conversation. I have a background in technology myself, got my first degree in engineering, and I am now calling on one of my own juniors from college to this conversation. And of course, being a tech person, often I don't really talk about tech on these shows, but now that tech is in the hot seat, so to speak, we were just talking offline with our host, our guest, about that. And so, without much further ado, I wrote it in the profile for the text for the show description. You will see we would like to welcome Sophia Hasnain to the show.
Thank you.
Sophia is a graduate of NED University. With our university, we don't talk about the year we graduated, we talk about the year we started. Rather, we
Started.
talk about the year we finished high school and the year we started because there was no guarantee when we would finish. I-
Exactly.
My set wasted about 3 years. We graduated in 94 instead of 91. And I believe Sophia was about 3 years behind us, so also went through that rigmarole.
Yeah.
Although the ship had started writing itself right about then.
We were
Sophia
only late by 6 months or so. Not much.
Yeah. And now it's a fixed 6 months. It's not
Yeah.
moving or anything. Sophia went on to get a master's from Germany, I believe. And
No,
now,
Michigan.
Michigan, right? You got your master's in Michigan, then worked in Germany, right? For a
Yeah.
while. So Sophia has experience around the globe, a global experience, but most importantly, she is running a what I like to see as a flourishing technology business out of Karachi, which is her own baby. And the name is Linked Things, which comes off, I was just talking to Sophia about, comes off from the name of one of those technologies that keep developing and growing under the surface, and then suddenly they burst onto the scene, and everyone from Dawn newspaper in Karachi to the New York Times are doing headlines, right? So in her case, it's Internet of Things or IoT. But in this day and age, there are a few other things we need to talk about. AI. And so Sophia has just recently was at MWC 25, I believe the conference is
Yes.
called, in Barcelona. So we'll actually ask her to start there, give us a little bit of a spiel. What's the conference? What is this conference circuit that these cool CEOs turn up at and talk to each other at? And then we get stuff. We have a link to Sophia's summary from the conference in the description. So, Sophia, assalamu alaikum, welcome. Good to see
Welcome.
you, talk to you again.
Thank you. Thank you for giving the opportunity to talk about what I was going through, overwhelmed by the conference, and had to take it out. So I took it out in two ways. One was more candid on Twitter, which was like very blunt, where I said
Ooh,
that
we got to grab that.
we're all seeing that, and then I refined it a little bit for LinkedIn audience because we all try to be a little bit more politically correct and more
Right. Just so you
acceptable.
know, right now we are not streaming on LinkedIn. We're streaming on the other two platforms, Facebook, Twitter. So
Okay.
you can speak freely, and then we can talk about whether this is appropriate for the LinkedIn audience.
I mean, now that it's out, and I think it has also been sort of tagged. I mean, this post was also tagged on a couple of other forums, and people have picked it up outside Pakistan as well, and also, in circuits that I am not in, but it was picked up by a couple of other people,
Yeah, but the point is,
or LinkedIn influencers, I would say, LinkedIn
our
influencers.
content here is less filtered because we all kind of preen on LinkedIn.
Right.
I don't even mention this platform on LinkedIn much.
Acha, okay.
But go ahead. So tell us about MWC 25
So,
and how you end up
Mobile
doing at a
World
conference.
Congress is organized by GSMA, which is the trade association of the mobile operators. They have two arms. So one is the commercial arm, which is actually all about conferences and events across the world, and they do, I think, 6 or 7 events around the world in one year. So GSMA
Right.
organizes Mobile World Congress is the largest, the biggest one, where I think it started out to talk about GSM technologies, but it has also become quite a big telecom and IT show, to so to say, and technology show. So it is. I think everyone goes except Apple, that has never been to this show, and they have tried to stay away. But all the US companies, telcos, all the telecom companies, and all the IT players. I think everybody has got something or the other over there, talking about their technologies, what they're going to bring the next year, what are they working on, and always bragging about it. I think so. Generally, what happens in conferences is, or in the exhibitions, I think it's just a show of power and technology, and also I think since this world is so much male dominated, I always feel that it's all about show off and display of ego and all of that over there, and you'd actually see it from the size of the stands again, that how big they are, what they're displaying. One thing that struck me when I entered this conference, and I don't know, I was just, I always get dazed by all these big conferences, and I entered from the side. So I missed the Huawei stand the first day when I entered. And I was walking through this, and I saw that, the technology, the way it is now happening is that we don't have big equipment to display as we probably had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, like, big servers, or, you set up big racks and show that, what you're doing. But rather, the devices are getting smaller and smaller. And what you're talking about, AI, you don't need a big space. All you need are screens or what you're talking about, and maybe few places, few chairs and tables. But still, I think we've got huge real estate that these companies spend on to talk about devices that are getting smaller and smaller. So that's, I think, one thing that struck me, that we, technology wise, or the device size wise, we're getting smaller and smaller, but the real estate that we actually consume is getting bigger, and it's always empty. So you get a lot of freebies, coffees, conversations, and so on, and everybody, and you also get amazed by, like, how many ways are there to display same kind of technology or talk about the same thing, in so many different ways. Like, everybody has got their own angle to it, that they want to project. So it's always good to be there, but it's also always very overwhelming, because then you get dazed, and it's very difficult to focus. So Mobile World Congress happens as a location which is a little bit outside Barcelona, but still accessible. 100 more than 100,000 people were there in Barcelona. It was very difficult to find hotel or even Airbnb, and I know people who lived in shared accommodations for one night or 2 nights, that they were there. So this is, and these are the top technologists who would probably not like to give up their privacy, but they had to do this because Barcelona was full. And this venue is called Fira Gran Via, and when you enter it, it has got 8 halls full of technology and conference material that is happening. Everybody is displaying and also holding their tech shows, conversations. So there are a lot of side conversations happening along with the main stage conference, and then round tables happening. And I think the good thing is that this conference also engages exclusively with policymakers and governments. So they have a separate area where they're talking about, that's called ministerial program, and there all the policy related conversations happen. Mobile for development is another aspect of GSMA, and they engage very extensively with the government uh, on serving the technology or bringing the technology to underserved communities, and how mobile money, mobile identity, digital identity, women inclusion, DEI, innovation, climate change, all these different topics also take place there. Um, and then there is something called 4 years from now, which has also become a brand, and there you see a lot of startups that are incubated by the government, startups that are incubated by big telcos and big companies. So they all come and display there. So they have a limited space, very small, I would say 2 meters or 3 meters by 3 meter kind of space that they get, and they also get a lot of footfall over there because investors are there. So it's a mixed bag, but it is again overwhelming to go there. And I think it was there already 30th edition or something like this.
Right. So yeah, I've seen friends, and I'm based in Silicon Valley, so I've heard the stories of people, trouncing around Barcelona and trying to find
Yes.
space and all of that. But going back to what you said, and I think this is a good conference to start a conversation about technology. And as your title for your post was Technology Meets Geopolitics. And my point with that, I know I often sound like the squeaky wheel around here, and almost people blame me for just being contrarian for no reason. But my point here is technology and geopolitics have always been intertwined. I mean, the points you were raising and like your reaction, because now it's obvious, right? In the last month or two, especially since President Trump took over, it's and Elon Musk is so prominent, things are coming out in the front. But
Yes.
and your posts on your one, I want to sort of group your posts, right? So you have a post where you're saying the US playbook is going global. On the other hand, you're talking about the AI isn't the future, it's the or actually let's take that one separately. But so that you're saying the US playbook is going global, then you're talking about globalization versus localization. Then I might even group things like remote and freelance work being under threat. All of these things are things that point to what a big role the US played in all of this,
Yes.
but also one aspect of technology and governance we don't talk about, especially when you and talking about the mobile world is very appropriate because the mobile world is very different in each region and sometimes each country, right? The way we use cell phones in the US
It's
is not
different.
the way they are used in India or Pakistan. Europe is different. Africa is completely different. You talked about mobile banking. In Africa, mobile banking is much bigger because it takes up a much bigger part of the market. I mean, people are banked through the phone. Just like
Yeah.
some years ago, I have to point
Yeah.
out to people that there's a large part of the world whose first phone was a mobile phone. They never had landlines,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And some of us are in that category, right? We never had a landline to our own name before we had a cell phone. Maybe you had a landline in the house with parents and all.
Yeah.
So, how the mobile world particularly is regulated from country to country, what effect US companies and now Chinese companies are having on how this technology evolves, and that's the technology side. Then how business evolved, because you're talking about how Doge style restructuring, DEI, remote work versus freelance work. These, to me, these are
Climate
all
change.
dynamics that were already on the table. And of course, with everything, President Trump, Elon Musk suddenly have an outsized influence and much more visible influence on things. So I wanted to, I know I'm going on about this a little bit because I have that contrarian point of view I want to put on the table. And you are coming from the third world, so you also have this slightly outside view of Americans and Western or even local technologists operating. So I see your points. Could you summarize like these two three things? And when you talk about remote versus freelance work, was that distinction visible at a conference like this? I mean, was it being discussed as
Okay.
well? What would
I
you?
think so. I think first let me take this word geopolitics and where it comes from. So I think we all, or at least I felt in the last 25, 30 years that I've been in tech, that, tech has tried to keep, like for general public tech, like us workers, have tried to keep us ourselves aloof from the politics. And always, like, haven't gone so outright and talking about politics in technology. All the people that I have met and worked with generally just try to stay away from politics. I think that we have seen all of this whole little bit of getting into politics with, social media influence, and in the last 6 7 years that people have started actively using social media for political reasons and so on. So a lot of that mix. But I think the word geopolitics itself is, this is how everybody was referring to what is happening in the US. So
Okay.
everybody, right? So this was the first conference after President Trump taking over in January, and all the things, like, that have started to happen since his inauguration late January. And a lot of people are feeling the pinch of it. I think we have seen
The pinch in
impact
what
on.
ways? So let's
Okay, I'll tell you. So, like, for example, I think the first shock was the USAID. funding getting cut, especially in the third world, where a lot of funding is used for, I mean, so-called tech for good or
Hmm.
development for development purposes, right? So that's the first sort of the pinch that everybody got, or maybe the shock. It was not just the pinch; it was the shock. I think the USAID
So
being out
could
of the
one say
picture.
could one say that to some extent the tech folks are being outed for being dependent on aid rather than all the propaganda we hear
No,
about them?
generally. So I'm talking about generally, right? So, these are the drastic measures that came in. And then I think with what people saw his reaction on Ukraine and how, the US, so how the Europeans are now reacting. So I'm like, this um, this MWC is not about third world only. I mean,
I
it's
know.
like the biggest of the big companies, all the telcos being there, and all the
No, and
US companies over there. But I
what
think
I what I like to
geopolitics.
mention what I could mention is that mobile technology particularly is technology that everyone on the planet engages with.
Yes,
First world, third world are not separate. Like, because when you talk about high end, okay, maybe the first world is using it more and is being, but mobile technology is in every pocket, right? So the third
every
world
part,
indirectly,
and
this is
it's
an
actually
industry that
leading.
directly
So
touches everyone.
yeah, so I work for Mobile for Development, and I see that that's leading. So when you talked about mobile banking and all, that's like leapfrogging, and
Hmm.
that has happened with mobile. Like, so a lot of mobile based banking or mobile money operations were because there was nothing else. So the first way to connect with the internet for a lot of people was through a handset, a mobile handset, right? And I was talking to someone there in Barcelona, and they didn't believe that we don't care about fixed broadband. So that's out of, I mean, fixed broadband penetration in countries like Pakistan, Vietnam, uh, Philippines is way less than what it is in US, proportionately, and there is a lot more mobile penetration, and there are different varieties of mobile penetration, and how we actually sell mobile minutes is also very different in these countries versus how it is packaged in
Right.
Western
So,
world.
tell us about this in this segment. It's that you said the U.S. One of your topics on your post is the U.S. playbook is going global, and I would connect that to things like how that affects remote versus freelance work for you know
Yes,
for employees and otherwise, and also how that affects the whole globalization localization thing, because there's a
yes,
counterintuitive thing too.
yes.
People are now disconnecting from the US as well, which leads into the Huawei presence.
देखिए,
How do you see that out?
so I first think that the geopolitics was, this word was used a lot in in
Mhm.
this Congress. So everybody was referring to what is happening in the US and the repercussions of it as geopolitics of our times. This is exactly what I've heard. Maybe I
Yeah,
was
and
there for
I mean
2 days, and maybe
sometimes,
100 times, right?
like you
So
said,
this
tech
was
is
very
so.
spontaneous, title, because that's what I heard. I mean, technology, and everybody was talking about geopolitics at the time, right? I think what we have seen with uh, this Department of Government Efficiency, for example, right? So
Hmm.
the way they are talking about work, and how they are then, so Doge, then USAID, then Department of State backing out of DEI initiatives, and also scaling back on climate. I think these are the four things that one could also see the impact on. So I'm not going on to, and then we'll come to localization and that, but these three, four things that are
You said
very
Doge,
prominently come out of the US.
Doge,
So
DEI, the climate thing, and what was the fourth one?
Doge, DEI, climate, USAID overall, and
The
Department of
AIDS
State,
thing,
right?
right? Because that
Right. So
affects finance flows and usage, and
yeah,
right.
and I think a lot of seed innovation um, was happening through this aid money, especially I would say in global south, right?
In the global.
And also a lot of, I mean, that's like the source of funding, right? So USAID was actually funding to a lot of different projects, and it was not always direct. So there are a lot of intermediary organizations
Hmm.
in the Western world who actually,
Right.
are used to make the money flow. And I think they also like get matching grants and matching funding and all of this. And I think with 50% of your funding going away means that also has an impact on other sources of funding, because everything is connected. And so I think Doge was, I think what really surprised me was that Doge example was used to push EU bureaucracy back, and telecom operators saying that we need EU to, because EU is known for its regulations, right? So that's
Right.
like
Overregulation.
they, before anything happens, they've got a regulation on it, and a lot of protection for consumers, and maybe they overdo it, but at least they're thinking it from all perspective.
Yeah, no,
So
I
they,
mean, footnote to that, it was the EU rules that finally forced Apple, for example, or the major phone set manufacturers to unlock phones in the US. You could buy a
yes,
phone in Germany. They forced them in Germany to
yeah,
make numbers portable, to allow people to take their set to another carrier. And even in the US, even today, people don't do it very often, or slowly it's become common, but they pushed back and held back. It was EU regulations that forced
yeah,
some of this change, and which
yeah.
is why I keep going back to this. The intersection between how technology evolves and how society and governance drives technology, right?
Yeah. So, but obviously businesses do not really like regulations, right?
Right.
So their idea was that, let's put all these regulations away and let us grow, and we are not. I mean, that's also a very prominent or much talked about view that, okay, US is growing and they are advancing in technology, China is also advancing technology, and Europe is just working on regulations, and that maybe that's also hampering innovation. So that's what people talk about, and they use Doge example to tell EU that you need Doge like kind of
Restructure.
restructuring in EU, and it is bureaucracy, because it is
It
like,
is bureaucracy. And
right,
the point is, both sides, to me, both sides are being disingenuous about how the other one affects them, right? Technology
right,
is driven, often funded, as you said. I mean, the internet itself is a product of the Department of Defense, as we never tire of
yes,
saying. So both the funding and the influence and structure of how technology is implemented. The old, going back to grad school, we were having those discussions about technological determinism versus social determinism, right? And in the real world, the two interact. There have been
hmm.
major things happening. So that was the US and Doge stuff happening. So jumping from that to, do you see Huawei? You actually have pulled out or called out Huawei's presence as being years ahead, when we do know, those of us who've operated in the third world, that Huawei does have a presence, right? They have a huge part of the handset market, for example, in Pakistan, even in India, which is, not friendly with China, right? So, but what were you seeing at the MWC that made you make this the
Okay.
first point you pulled out?
So as I told you that when I entered the first day, I was dazed, and I somehow missed the entrance for Huawei. So Huawei probably had half of one hall. There are
Hmm.
eight halls. They probably had half or at least a third of the first hall. So when I was leaving, I said I must look at Huawei before I leave on the second
Hmm.
day. So I tried to find it, and they had a separate entrance, and which had, I mean, not exclusive entrance, but was on the side. And when I entered, so they had a public space, then they have had a private space which required you to be taken in by a Huawei. There was invite only, and by some
Hmm.
Huawei team member. And they also apparently had another area which was only reserved for government and high level decision makers to showcase what they are working on. Okay, so the first thing you enter when you go to any other stand is like they've got two, three different displays, and talking about something which is all very related, and that's like something that I think also US investor mantra, at least, that you do one thing and do one thing good, and then you go to the next level and all of that. But when you go, to Huawei stand, they're doing everything. So they have got handsets and they have got your routers, they have got network equipment, they have got overall solutions for smart buildings, smart campuses, whatever, smart cities, manufacturing, everything. So this whole thing that you build your companies or your technology step by step, or you do, where one good vertical integration. Sorry, they there is nothing like vertical or horizontal. They have got crisscross covering all aspects of technology and life, actually, right? So they have got everything. And I just went through this stand once, and I was like, my God, they have got solutions for enterprises, consumers, everything is there for network operators, for governments, for small businesses, for large businesses,
So
everything,
no, I get that.
right?
You know, I've done a little stint working for Huawei in one of their again semiconductor department division,
Hmm.
but and you can see whenever you interact with Huawei that they have a range of everything. I mean, from the simple dumb handset all the way to the fabric end of the internet, right? And
Yes.
everything. They have their servers there. They have their own chips now, and
They've
like you're
got
saying,
their own chips, yes,
they're
as
also
you
doing
talked about, yeah.
solutions, which to me is, in the old days, in the 70s, we used to have conglomerates for everything, right? I mean, even
Yeah,
today, Samsung is a conglomerate. They do a
yeah,
lot of stuff.
exactly.
Mitsubishi is a conglomerate. In the US, we have actually gone the other way. I mean, like
Yes.
Intel is broken up into five different layers, and now I don't know where it's going. But uh, so are you saying that even in a place like Pakistan, which historically has relatively good relationships with China,
Hmm.
even there you folks are not as integrated with the Huawei ecosystem or as adoptive of the Huawei ecosystem as you could be or should be or might be because
See,
of the
they,
US dominance?
I'll tell you. See, Pakistan is a very low budget market, low capital market, and
Okay.
you don't see a lot of their innovations here. So what you see from Huawei is huge here. I'm not saying that they're not huge, and they are also doing a lot of projects, but they are usually doing big projects in Pakistan. So like smart cities projects, you do not see them doing, getting into the industrial automation, for example, in this market, which makes sense, I think. But they are coming up with very niche, top level, high revenue projects, and because Pakistan is not really a revenue generation market for them, in the sense that
As
they,
with a lot of other industries.
yeah, maybe
So
handsets. Maybe they're in handsets and then they're doing some government projects,
okay, so
right?
the middle is missing. So where
Middle is
are they
completely
working? Did,
missing.
did you get a feel for that? Which parts of the world do they already dominate in terms of penetration or
I
having
would
a
say that they are everyone that is looking for cost-effective solutions, right? And that has money. So they are there, I think, in Middle East as well,
Middle East,
Saudi,
Southeast Asia,
Saudi, Middle
Africa?
East, GCC countries. I would say even Eastern Europe, um,
Yeah, of course,
and
historically
and
too.
Far
Yeah,
East,
Far East,
right?
Africa. How much of a again personal interest? How much of a presence did you see from Africa at the conference?
Very little,
Very
very
little,
little.
still not.
So not even in the startups category. I think that's the way West still sees Africa is like, yeah, we go, we help them and do this, right? So like the whole innovation stories are also tech for good, and we saved so many people from hunger, and we provided so much employment and all of that. So they use Africa as, not, I don't know,
As a testing ground, and
a
that's
poster child to talk about how good technology can do,
yeah,
right? But
it's
not scaling it. So you do not see a lot of African countries represented over there, or there aren't probably big companies, and there are more people who are actually users and doing some service. So they're using mobile
right.
technologies for services, right? So you do not have product companies or even developer companies coming in. For that matter, I didn't see many Pakistani companies either. I'm sure that there were,
Right.
because people talked about that they saw some companies, but I mean, they may be hidden somewhere, and I didn't really
Little.
see them because it was a big show, right? And it's impossible to cover every aspect.
Right.
So,
So in that case, I would ask you the next obvious question, not just as a Pakistani, but curious. Who was there from India? What were the big names? Did you
so
notice?
there, so obviously, Infosys, Wipro, those
They were
companies were
all,
there.
yeah.
Tata and all
Any
their.
device companies? Anyone from the hardware side of the shop?
No, I don't think so.
That's still surprising. I mean, we keep talking
Yeah.
about how India should be coming up, and as fellow South Asians, we're like, why aren't you guys in this? Anyway, so let's move on to some of just more industry-wide things. You mentioned AI, and you put that cliche out there. AI is in the future; it's the present. You know how we know AI is the present is when people start asking for 5 years of experience in a one-year-old technology on LinkedIn. So, what was the manifestation of that? How is that
It's
working out?
everywhere. So I think in the on these stands they put what they're doing, and everybody was doing AI,
So,
right?
was that a name check? Was that fundamental changes? Was that because at
I
some
think people
stage it
are
just becomes
using it.
part of everything, right?
People are using it, and I think another thing I think where I was also reading a few posts which make sense is that like a lot of system integrator role is coming in, and
Mm.
AI actually is something that people are, I mean, for everything, network design to all the way up to applications, right? So network design, RF planning, your base station design, how energy optimization in networks.
So, would it be appropriate to say that basically this is design automation work its way up the value chain, so to speak, right?
Exactly, and also like bringing on, but I also saying that we can optimize it through AI, right? I mean,
That whole
this
thing.
could
Yeah,
be
I
just
mean,
simple analytical
from
or business
automation to
intelligence.
machine learning to AI, and these are what we are currently calling AI. These are all steps in that.
Exactly.
Uh,
So from all the way, so everybody is doing something on the AI, and also with AI, companies like ZTE and others talking about data centers and energy efficiencies in data centers and so on, and cooling in data centers.
right,
So
a lot of that management, right?
a lot of that management. So
Hmm.
AI everywhere, all aspects of AI, and everything
Okay.
is AI.
Okay, so now let's turn it around, and I want to keep the IoT thing for the end because I want to let you go on that. That's your baby. So, but let's come to the globalization versus localization thing. I've always been a critical. I'll put my chips on or cards on the table of how globalization was done the last time, the big time, right? It was almost used as an excuse for stuff, is my take, right? It could have been done in a more responsible way, both, and that's where the geopolitics versus technology thing to me is most was glaringly missing last time. Technology was just allowed to do whatever it wanted to do without the thought of how will this affect geopolitics, how will this affect governance, how will this affect society. And it could have been done in a more responsible way. What are you seeing now, especially with the localization? Because your post says, supply chains are no longer designed for cost efficiency. And of
Yeah.
course, that's the other thing. As you and I have worked on the hardware side of things, we've been agonizing over this for 10, 20 years that how do you end up having 80% of the production of the most critical commodity on the planet on one island, an
Yeah.
island that is prone to earthquakes and is geopolitically, use that word, in danger all the time. You have one small earthquake and half the semiconductor production of the world goes offline.
Right.
How is that sensible planning for
But
anybody?
but I think we all get into this euphoria most of the time, right? So cost efficiency, and I this was again a conversation that I attended over there where a professor was talking about like how for the last maybe 30 years we have been only driven by bringing cost efficiencies. So we forgot about everything, and we said okay, and in one way we also gave a lot of IP out just to bring cost efficiency. So I've also gone through. I will not. Okay, let's. talk about it offline. But what I'm saying is cost efficiency, right? So
Right.
cost efficiency was driving everything. But I think what we lost overall as business was the control over the supply chain, also control over the innovation, control over the product design and development eventually, and the overall cost of the technology. So that is a big realization now.
See
And I
that,
think
and I'd love you for saying that, because you're bringing out, you're mentioning or analyzing this from the business leadership point of view, right? I know you also have thoughts on the strategic. I mean, my point is not even cost efficiency, it's strategic importance, right? How does governance or geopolitics allow critical inputs to be completely outsourced, right? Like microchips, the most critical
yeah,
input, right?
yeah.
How do you end up with a situation where the US has almost no proper semiconductor manufacturing on this continent, right?
Because we always talked about cost efficiency. Can you do it
You did. I
in
mean, when you say we, you mean business leaders.
we?
But
I mean, generally, we
okay, so
means not you
let
and
me
I,
let me
but
turn this around.
like,
Okay, like you said, we in the tech world, and often those of us who've been following the tech world, and governance has pretty much been, it's been the tail wagging the dog. Last time they only thought about cost efficiency, so this time they're only thinking about what is the because I'm sure there is, what is the over enthusiasm that you might be afraid of today that we are overdoing? Are people thinking more strategically? Are they taking the lesson that we need to focus more broadly, not switch from A to B?
I think people. So we are at the realization stage that the geopolitics has changed the business. We cannot no longer just rely on cost efficiencies. Also, I think all this. I think even I think if I look back, like this whole thing started in Biden era as well, when people
Post
they
COVID,
tried to bring a lot of reindustrialization, and
basically
McKinsey
COVID,
talked.
right? COVID
Yeah,
forced us to think about what happens when you can't ship chips from Taiwan to the US,
yeah,
right? To put it crudely,
and and also bringing manufacturing back to no, not at the chips level, but
everything,
generally, right?
right?
So chip is highly sophisticated, but again, regular manufacturing bringing back to US was one of the big mantra, and I think at that time people realized that how poorly managed the industrial space is and how outdated the technologies that they are using over there. Um,
And basically,
so
how non-distributed the supply chains are, right? The supply chains
right.
are too limited.
And also, like the technology that is used in manufacturing was quite outdated compared to what where their manufacturing was happening. So obviously they were investing in the efficiencies and technology for
Right.
production, right? But that was not happening here as much as it was happening in other parts of the world, or where the manufacturing was going. So so I think the localization is going to increase a lot because people want now more control on innovation, and they want more control on supply chain. What they call now supply chain resilience, right? So,
Okay. I say
right?
strategic, they say resilience. I'll remember that. That's the phrase they're using then. Resilience.
That's the phrase they're using, right? So they want to bring
Right.
resilience, which basically means that you want to have control. You want to actually track down where this part was manufactured and to what level, and innovation and all of that, right? So, and more control. I think it's all about control now than anything else. It seems like, and control over innovation and control over availability and control over what they desire to have, so features and products and quality. So I think that
So, okay.
that's significant, and
Yeah.
that's why I think this localization will increase. And obviously there is now a rift between, or seemingly a rift between, Europe and
And the
US. So
US.
Europe
Right.
is also looking at localizing a lot of things. I've seen on LinkedIn posts, at least I think it also all started
Right.
6 7 months ago when they started talking about European cloud and European
Right.
devices and
That
European
starts
all of
on
this.
the cloud side. That starts in defense manufacturing and things like that.
Yeah, and this will go down. I think this will also trickle down. So this will happen because again, it's about control, and that's why I think freelancers and this is also because of the AI. We were also feeling that they were not sorry. So with AI, a lot of low level freelance work was diminishing in this market, and now we also see that AI, and with this whole thing that we want to have more local control, a few more where the innovation is happening, that may also not come to the outsourced markets. So we will
Basically the
see
onshoring
if,
aspect.
yeah,
So yeah,
offshoring.
so
So this will
basically
be a lot more onshoring will happen.
what I'm hearing from you is that this is still early days. People are flailing to find this out. Of course, on LinkedIn and our resumes, everyone is claiming 5 years experience on a 1 year technology. That's it is what it is. So coming back and maybe heading towards close before we get to IoT, because I want to save that. The idea of remote versus freelance work, work environment, work culture, COVID gave us, like with supply chains, COVID gave us a huge wake up call on that. I was always a skeptic about whether everyone was going. Again, you were saying the over enthusiasm, to use your word. Everyone was saying, "Oh, now forever we will all be working at home." Like, no, you guys don't. Have you met your boss? Have you met your CEOs? Have you met the tech bros? They're gonna want you back in the building before you can take your mask off, and that's what happened, right?
Yes.
So when you post something with saying remote and freelance work is under threat, I'm like, when was it ever uh, that established to begin with? Although in the job market here, I'm seeing the lower end is still, people are still looking for remote workers, sort of efficient and effective remote workers, as a way of cost cutting as well. That
Yes.
cost cutting aspect is there. And as a maybe you can comment on this as a business leader yourself. You have your own teams to run. So tell us about that and how that appeared at the conference, or what you're seeing across the globe, because there's everyone there, right?
So I think everything is connected in the sense that once they start looking at localization, and that's not in hardware localization or supply chain localization. I think on these kind of offshore work that used to go, or outsourced work, I think that would come back. Again, the other impact is the AI work. So a lot
Hmm.
of design work. Initially, even I think now when you use these AI tools, I used to call them junior analysts, but now they've become senior analysts. So you get, a lot of your work is done. I mean, I use a lot of AI for my work nowadays. So we
Hmm.
see this shift, and I think what I saw initially sitting in Pakistan was that last year or last 2 years, everybody was talking about how freelancers are bringing remittances to the country and how big that economy is, and we must be looking at. But I think if the freelancers are not contributing uh, to innovation, to the to some higher skill level, they would not be utilized, right?
So you
uh,
see a hit
what
happening there.
Yeah, I see that happening here. So people need to upskill, and I think that's also exhausting for freelancers. I also wrote once that we all keep talking about freelancers and all of this, but we need to understand how exhausting it is to continue as a freelancer all through your life, right? So this could be a phase, but once you have to start paying bills regularly, and you have to also upskill yourselves and meet the deadlines and all of this is not
That's
everyone's cup
all
of
right.
tea, right? It
Right. But
has a
then, of
toll.
course, that's a whole other discussion that I do want to have sometime, because that's, like you said, there's personal evolution in your career, and then there is the evolution of a market or a space. Like India has been working its way up the value chain, right?
Yes.
Which is why I asked you about the hardware question, is like, are they evolving on that axis as well? So, anyway, so that, but specifically at the conference, was that obvious? Were people looking at it? How was that happening? Was that part of the
I think the conversations. So this was not really something that you see on stage, on stands, but the conversations, like where are we going
Hmm.
eventually, right? So, and all everything is connected. So AI taking over a lot of low level work, people focusing on localization more. They want to have more control on development. So I think that's, looking at all of this, again we can infer that you will not have a lot of offers for freelancers, and outsource work. I think outsource work would come, for example, now in AI, definitely, right? Because a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah, that's
documents need to
right. So,
be
yeah, things
crunched,
evolve.
and,
You get the
right?
prompt engineering and use of AI, and like you said, things will have to. If I'm being optimistic, I'd say it'll force people to work up the value chain to move up the
Yeah.
value
So people have to, exactly, that's the word, that they have to actually work up the value chain, but and that's not happening. At least, I mean, the market that I'm sitting in Pakistan, so you hardly see people. There are opportunities for them to upskill and take it to the next level, because who is going to train them? So that line was more for Pakistani context, like where I
chain.
see,
No,
right,
and
that
other contexts
we,
and similar markets. I mean, the Philippines, I believe, is in the same kind of
yes.
space. Kenya has a lot of outsourcing work. Uh, the African continent, they are doing more of this. And so, moving on, and this is getting pretty long. I wanted to come back to IoT, which is your home space.
Something.
And I do see, like everyone else, you are. What's your take? Let's sort of transition into it. Are you using AI as a primary work stuff? Are you? How many times do you have to mention IE on each business slide before you're comfortable? I mean, what is the
So I think that I'm focusing primarily on Pakistani market for IoT,
right?
and I hardly use the word AI here, because I think,
Interesting.
yeah, I mean, people are not at that level. The business people and the people that we, so manufacturing sector generally, and smart cities that we work in, the two sectors, um, very little to sell. I mean, they want, tell us what is happening, please, right? So that is what their major
Yeah, I know.
pain
I'm just
point is,
showing you
right?
because sometimes people get into that thing. If you're not mentioning AI, then you can't be serious. That kind of the flavor of the week thing. So tell us about the IoT space in Pakistan because I do get fascinated slowly and steadily. Like we say, everything we use has a chip in it. From your watch to from the cheapest watch you might own to your car, everything is running on microchips. And
So,
increasingly homes, we have HVACs and systems and controls. So, but you are working mainly in industrial IoT. How's that working?
so, um, so it's been 9 years, more than 9 years, that we've been working on IoT in a market that doesn't want it.
Actually, let me
And
first
we've
ask you because not everyone here will be that familiar. How do you, in a thumbnail, describe the phrase IoT? What do you tell people you do when you're at wedding receptions?
So when I go and I tell them, we connect things to the internet. That's
Right.
the simplest thing, right? Um, and uh, and why do we connect it? Because you need to know what is happening on the ground, and so on and so forth. There are certain real good use cases of in IoT, and also I think we also have to distinguish ourselves from industrial automation, because that's also happening. I mean,
Hmm.
that's a lot of that's prevalent in Pakistan. So industrial automation is not new, but we have to actually distinguish ourselves, and that making that distinction is difficult, because the value for data is still very little for industries. But but we could actually create a few scenarios for them where we brought some efficiencies and operate some operational efficiencies, some cost cuttings, some more visibility and transparency, and that's helping us, and some real time calculations on manufacturing KPIs.
So just to
So
clarify, so what when you make the distinction between say industrial automation and IoT, Internet of Things, you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, because back 30 years ago when I started my career back in Pakistan, we had players like Zelen Private Limited and to some extent digital communications and all. They were doing what they would go and we would learn about there's a sugarcane factory and we have to go in and automate the process, right? So what controls on, off, SCADA, the whole thing.
it's
That
startup.
is industrial automation, right? Automated
Yes.
factories and all. But when you do IoT, you're talking about every device, every little thing being internet connected. So
Yeah.
I've seen
So
really cool examples on your website of every cow having a bracelet with it's like simple description.
right,
Every
right.
cow having a bracelet so you can track where it is, how much milk it's giving, all of that through to the other most practical example which people need to know more about, where your company runs a number of air quality monitors
Yes.
all over Pakistan at this point, right?
No.
Not just
Yes.
Karachi. Karachi has quite a few, but all over Pakistan. So anyone that wants an air quality number can go directly to your website, find the right page, which I think you have linked from the front, and see the air quality in their region, their city. That is all what you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
Internet of of
yeah,
things.
right. No, so the distinction that a simple distinction I make is that we don't give you conveyor belts, for example, right? So we will not give you conveyor belts to ship your products out, but what we will give you is we'll give you the count of the products that are going out. So that's the distinction that we make. So if you want to know the count and you don't have a conveyor belt, we will not offer you. So you need to have a certain level of maturity in your
Right.
automation level before we come in.
Before you go
Uh,
in.
it's a bit difficult on the
So what?
manufacturing side because obviously over the years all the costs are built into the books basically. So all these inefficiencies are costs unaccounted for and they are already put on the books as some headline heading or some row
Basically, the
in the
loss
book,
aspect is
right? So for
already
them,
written it
yeah,
off.
for them efficiencies really don't make much sense. And also visibility and transparency are something that we now see with the new generation coming in of these
Mm.
industrial owners. Another really good hook that I found, and I was very enthusiastic for the last 15 months, but I don't know what we will do next on that, is that there is a lot of, this ESG reporting coming in where the manufacturers have to report on their green
Oh, yeah.
manufacturing practices, right? Or carbon footprint, basically. So when they're talking about their carbon footprint and GHG emissions, there is a lot of greenwashing going on at the moment. There is a higher demand from EU, and there was higher demand from the US market as well to start reporting carbon footprint of the products that are produced in Pakistan, Vietnam, Bangladesh, India, Brazil, whatever, the shirt that you're wearing, the shirt I'm wearing, what is the carbon footprint, what kind of practices are used, energy consumption, how much fossil fuel, renewables, what wastewater treatment, and all of that. So this new hook, which is basically buyer driven. So buyer now needs to know this data.
Mm.
You can and here the companies have the exporters have huge compliance departments for their buyers where they are doing nothing but filling out forms and telling them what their carbon footprint is. If we can automate all of that for the comfort of the buyers and for the convenience of the local manufacturer, this would be a win-win. So I had actually invested quite a bit of time on looking at this as an option because nobody really cares about operational efficiencies and cost transparencies and all of that here because as I
Not
said
even,
that's
see,
already built in
you
your
can't
book.
even go and show them you've written off 5%, 10% losses. I can get you that money back. But
They don't
no.
care. They don't care, right?
Yeah, no, as working as a technical writer, one of the best spiels I heard for my job function came from actually a sales manager, right? A sales
Right,
director, VP of sales, who said, our there's a certain cost to every support call, right? $1,000 till
right.
support call closes, right? So from the moment
Hmm.
our support engineer picks up the phone to the moment when the problem is solved, on average we spend $1,000, and we get
Hmm.
X number of calls every year. You multiply that, it's $19 million. If you can save me 10% of that, you've paid for yourself. That kind of logic, right? But you're telling me in some markets they're not mature enough, even that doesn't work.
No, so I mean, paper based, see, the labor is cheap, right?
Labor
So
issue,
the
right?
cost of automation and making ROIs, and there are big companies where we go explain and we think that, we've almost sold them this. They said, oh, yeah, I think we'll first start with Google Sheets and we'll do manual entries and see where we go, right? So yeah, these are big manufacturers. I'm not going to
Right.
name them.
You need a
But
side business doing people sourcing in terms of people to sit down and enter data.
so this is where I see still some interest, and I think the other where IoT can come in and provide real authentic data is to AI, because obviously everybody is running out of data for AI, as they say, and AI is hallucinating and so on what they're talking about now. So I think getting real world data, which is authentic, which is reliable, trustworthy, that you can use for your models. I think that's the role for IoT now,
Okay.
mostly
So
in
anyway,
these markets.
yeah.
In these
So I
markets.
I think we've gone all the way around this. Any closing thoughts on technology? On uh, what have you brought back? What is
I
going?
think it's interesting and scary times, okay, for technology. And I think what, you know, you have lived through .com boom and then the bust. I've lived through that as well. And that, I mean, some of these things are life changing, and also, you know, in some way they have impacted our lives, the boom and the bust cycles. But .com boom, obviously very optimistic, and people were talking about a lot of possibilities at that time. Some of them are still lingering on, and we may not have achieved the full expectations of those times. But we also saw a bust, and
Well, there's corrections happening, but in these
correction.
cases, I guess there's a lot of, it's like you said, it's early days yet between AI and this technology
But I
geopolitical
think,
reset.
see, corrections at the market level and corrections for at the business level is something. But
Right.
you know, overall, how ambitious and optimistic the humanity goes about it, and then just says, "Oh yeah, you know, with this we will be able to turn this and that." I
Oh
think
yeah,
the
the internet
news
was
is tightening
the
around
internet.
all that freedom that we talked about.
When you were in grad
Um,
school, it was the internet is going to make the world completely democratic. It was like,
yeah,
and I know you very skillfully avoided the word "state" earlier when you said, the business. What did you say? The business owners or something, business management class or something. It was like सीधे सीधे बोलो सेठ के बच्चे हैं तो सेठों के बच्चे हैं the current new generation of
a
business
new
owners.
generation of business owners.
Ah, सेठ के बच्चे भी. So, as we say in Pakistan. But thank you very much for all of this.
Pleasure.
It was
I hope
wonderful.
it was useful.
No,
Yeah,
well, the audience will let us know. We'll put this on LinkedIn too and see how people react. Because my interests often on this are not that closely related to technology. And frankly, it's been frustrating trying to talk social consciousness in the technological world. But now, like you said, geopolitics has caught up.
yeah.
Uh, and so things are going to be fun. Thank you. And we will
Pleasure.
come back and take it from there. I'm
Thank
going to
you
switch
for
back to
inviting me.
single thing and then take it out, and then maybe we can talk offline. Chali.
Okay,
So, folks,
perfect.
audience, you heard our conversation with Sophia, and let us know what you think. We'd like to see comments on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Yahoo itself, and let us know what you think, what else you'd want us to talk about, and how deep a dive you want on. As you saw, Sophia also has a good understanding not just of the Pakistani technology and industrial space, but more generally we have people that are engaged in that conversation. And as localization takes off, I was talking to my friend Rafi Hassan, who runs Alertly locally. I thought I'd give him a shout out. Where we are also talking about things like hyper localization. We're finding out about local things. And I'll say this again: anyone in Pakistan that wants air quality updates can go directly to link to that things.com, right? Or is it .com.pk? Just .com, and we can take it
Data.linkthings.ai. Hmm.
linkthings.ai and
Yeah.
get your data there.
Yeah.
So thank you, and we will talk again sometime. And take care. Remember to like and follow at iFakir on YouTube, Facebook, Blue Sky, Twitter, wherever you are. Take care.